Well, hello, everybody. It's 1:05, so we're going to get started. This is going to be a presentation on the Willis Run Restoration Project. Very excited about it. Thank you for attending. We appreciate it. My name is Robert Maiden. I'm the Managing PA Director for Working Lands Investment Partners. We like to go by Working Lands. We're the main contractor and designer and operator and maintainer of this potential project or this project. I'd like to introduce our team, if I may, and then we'll get started with the PowerPoint. With us that you can't see on the camera is Dan Spethman, our managing partner and CEO. He has over 40 years on the implementation and the academic side of stream restoration, wetlands restoration, and stormwater BMPs. So he's sort of the backbone of our organization. To my right, we have Mary Pace Goldman, who is our lead engineer. She owns her own company, Ripple Waters. She's been in this industry for over 20 years, focusing clearly on stream restoration and these type of projects and BMPs only, which is really unique in that sector. Has licenses in multiple states from New Jersey to New York to Pennsylvania, Virginia, and does projects in all those states, which is very important because she understands the difference between the regulatory differences between state and state. So she'll be our lead engineer on the project. We also have all the way on the end, we have Joe Sweeney from the Water Science Institute. He's a strategic partner with Working Lands. He has his own nonprofit, Water Science Institute, that uses a lot of modern technology and techniques to ascertain water quality benefits and able to identify sites, erosion rates, and he'll get into a little bit of that a little later in the presentation. We also have to my left, Latisse Brown, which does not need any introduction for this crowd, which is great. But I did want to say, very much we thank Latisse for all her work, all her efforts. This project could have never got off the out of the starting gate without her. She's just been a joy to work with. So thank you. We appreciate your passion for it. I'd like to also thank all the folks with the city of York. Really appreciate your support and supporting Latisse to allow this project to happen. So thank you to the city of York. And then finally, we have Emily with the York County Conservation District, who is the technical sponsor of the grant. Also, really great to work with. Couldn't get this project off the ground without her and in the York County Conservation District. So we really appreciate their support. So you can see that this is a very collaborative effort. And because of that, our presentation is going to be the same. So we're going to break it out. Each one of the individuals is going to kind of take out their section or propose their section. We'd love to have questions. I know it might be a little different with the Zoom, but we're happy for questions and comments. We'd love them. And we'd also like suggestions. And Latisse and I were talking about this earlier. Suggestions are great. So if there's ways we can improve the project or ideas that you have or concerns that you have that, we might not be aware of, let's get them out here now. We want to hear them. And then hopefully we can work that into the project. Because at this point, we're at 20-30% design. We get to 100% design here soon with Mary and her team working on things. So there is some flexibility there. So, if there's opportunities for us to improve, we'd love to do that. We'd love to try to work with the community. We're going to try to keep this presentation to about an hour. I know we have 2 hours scheduled, but we prefer to try to keep it concise. But as I said, please ask any questions. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Emily, who will start our presentation.
All right, thanks everybody. We'll get started with the presentation side of things. So an overview of the project. Well, yeah, there's my name. If you don't mind going to the next slide. Do we have ability? Yep, I'm turning it on.
Turn it on. Sure.
Oh, I had it on. I got it. Forward, backwards. On that. Oh, right here. Yep. Nice. As Robert mentioned already, it's a project that is involving a lot of different partners. The Conservation District is acting as the grant sponsor on behalf of the City of York. So we're going to take care of all the grant administration work, the paperwork side of things, the fun side of the project. City of York obviously is donating the land to use where the project's taking place. And then, of course, Working Lands is going to be responsible for the design, construction, and then maintenance of the project. Overview of it, it's located in Lincoln Park, and then it's going to move east through Noonan Fields and end at Kiwanis Lake. It's about a total of 1,200 linear feet of restoration work. There'll be some best management practices implemented as part of that project, stream restoration being the biggest, and then stream bank stabilization, and ultimately a creation of a riparian buffer. Willis Run is the stream reach in question, and it is part of the west branch of the Codorus Creek, which obviously is part of the Codorus Creek watershed. Here's an overview of the project map. So as you can see, left to right, that's the extent of the entire project that we're looking at today. As far as project funding goes, we were awarded a grant through the Environmental Protection Agency, which funnels the money through the Department of Environmental Protection at the state level. It's called a 319 non-point source pollution grant. I'm pretty sure all the construction funding is covered by this grant. So we're not looking at this point for any additional sources. The current conditions of Willis Run, it's obviously in an urban footprint. It's in an environmental justice distressed area, so that certainly gave us a leg up in the grant application side of things. But of course, it holds 2 recreational parks, and it is on an impaired stream as designated by EPA. And York County is one of 2 Tier 1 counties within the Chesapeake Bay watershed. So we're priority target for restoration, and less of a concern to you is that these will help with our total maximum daily load credits. And of course, flooding issues being in the urban area, this stream is subject to flood. So some of that this project hopes to address some of those issues. Again, overview of current conditions is what it looks like out there now. Some photos of the flooding that happened in 2021, so last August. And I'm sure it happens pretty regularly when the creek gets out of the banks. Flooding inundates the basketball court and the playgrounds, and there's some extreme erosion that are occurring on the banks because of the flooding. That's a photo of a typical section of the stream bank erosion on the project site. And the idea is the restoration will regrade those banks and provide more of a floodplain for the stream to get out in, dissipate some of that energy, and prevent some of that bank erosion. That's just an overview of some of the debris in the stream. There's some culverts, just some other general debris that is either resulting from the flooding, it shows up because of the flooding, or it's causing some of the flooding. So the goal is to...
Actually, those culverts were put there vertically to reduce erosion.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they're standing straight up.
All right, and clearly they are not straight up anymore. So some of this project is going to address some of those bigger flooding concerns. This is looking downstream along Willis Run, and it's semi-vegetated, but the idea is to remove some of the in-stream gravel bars, allow the stream more flow capacity in the stream channel itself, and then to revegetate the stream bank after the project is completed. And then looking further down or further upstream, well, I should say downstream of the project, but upstream towards Kiwanis Lake. This is what it's flowing into then. So the idea is that the project will reduce flooding impacts to this section. The results of the project, what we're looking to achieve, were less of a concern to the city of York. I should say, big picture wise, the project will reduce 160 pounds of nitrogen, 74 pounds of phosphorus, and 140,000 pounds of sediment annually. With some monitoring, we expect that those numbers will increase. The plan is also to add a 25-foot riparian buffer for a total of 1.5 acres of plantings consisting of native trees and shrubs along the project length. And of course, main concern, the flooding. The project will decrease the flooding that often occurs within the park and limit some of the damage that's done to the park amenities, and of course, allow greater recreation availability to the residents of the city.
All right. That is me, Mary Pace Goldman with Rippled Waters Engineering. I am the lead designer for the Willis Run project. So with the conceptual ideas that we've looked at for this site, what primarily informs the overall restoration approach is called a fluvial geomorphic assessment. And with that, we take measurements of existing erosion rates in the channel. We look at the stream banks, what's going on with vegetation, what type of soils exist in the stream banks, what type of soils exist in the bottom of the channel. And then we evaluate both the vegetation and the soils in combination with some additional information on the flows in the stream. Ultimately, all of that data gets fed into a series of scientific measurements and documentation that allows us to define what's called a riffle pool spacing ratio. So for Willis Run, we'll look at other watersheds that are of similar size in similar geology and similar soil types that are in healthy, stable conditions. And then we'll compare, what we have under current conditions to those reference sites to ultimately reestablish a more appropriate and healthy riffle pool spacing. So most streams of this type have riffle sequences followed with pools. And when you're able to improve the pools and riffles on a site, that ultimately allows for improved fishing habitat and enhanced water quality. So that's sort of the general approach to the restoration. It will also involve adjustments to the channel shape and size, and some other characteristics there as well. With the stream bed and bank stabilization, we will be regrading those stream banks, and we're going to be adding in some floodplain benching, which is not to say that, we're only going to allow the floodplain to be accessed during higher rain events. It will be accessed much more frequently and will be kind of contained in that overall new channel shape that we'll establish so that we can reduce some of those more frequent flood events that occur at the park. We will not have any stream banks where the slope exceeds a 3 horizontal to 1 vertical on the sides. And we will definitely need to incorporate some tow protection because of the high energies. Clearly, there was past efforts to stabilize with using those culvert pipes and some of those heavy things because we have significant force coming through in some of those heavy rain events. So in order to accommodate that, the tow protection measures will be needed in certain portions of the channel. That can be accomplished with boulders and things like, culverts and other techniques of that nature. The other, frankly, more optimal for water quality technique involves the use of root wads. So those would be fallen trees or trees we can bring in from offsite to create that energy dissipation and roughness at the base of the stream channel, while also providing habitat for benthic macroinvertebrates and fish species and other herptile species. We can also look at the rock riffle enhancement. So we know there's some rock obviously in the stream channel. We saw that on a photo a few minutes ago. And by changing the shapes of those riffles and grading them, we can offer some vertical grade control that also improves energy dissipation and improves water quality. And then the third sort of pillar to the restoration approach is the riparian corridor enhancement. We have tree and shrub planting proposed along the entire stream length. with that 25-foot buffer. We'll be using primarily native trees, well, all native trees and shrubs, and the ones that tend to thrive the best in these types of settings include sycamore, dogwoods, and willows. We also use, shrubs like winterberry, buttonbush, and that will obviously be selected with maintenance in mind, knowing what will be easiest for the city to maintain in the future, as well as what's going to be most desirable for the park itself. With that comes the need for some invasive species control. Typically, that's done with mechanical removal if it's extensive, through brush hogging and hand pulling if less extensive, and then ultimately a long-term monitoring of that as well. So we just put together a very simplified conceptual plan, which shows sort of in blue the areas that will be receiving some regraded banks, and some of the more intensive live stake vegetation. And then we also have some grade controls shown in here, just for example purposes. The exact locations will obviously be defined once we collect all of our preliminary field data, but this gives you a general sense of the footprint of the area that we'll be proposing the work within. All right, handing that off to Latisse.
Thank you. And I'm just going to touch on some education and outreach. I wanted education and outreach to be pretty big component of this project, just including our residents, including our employees, as well as sponsors and other folks. So first off, I kind of wanted to do an education day. I definitely want to involve our city school students as a learning field trip about the restoration, why we did it, and the outcome as well. We definitely want to include Devers, Ferguson, STEAM Academy, and pretty much all of our York City schools, and get our children introduced to water quality and things like that. We want our students to visit the project site, learn about non-point source pollution, the connection that the creek has to the Chesapeake Bay and the Susquehanna River, and so they can kind of get what they do here in New York City affects our Chesapeake Bay. We also want to provide the teachers with materials that they can use in the classroom once the field trips are finished, so they can continue their classroom education. We want to incorporate community education by speaking with neighborhood association groups, speaking directly with residents who live along the park and along the creek, just to give them the opportunity to ask questions, to voice their concerns, and also to give us suggestions of what they would like to see in their neighborhood. And also, upon project completion, we would like to install some educational signage explaining why we did what we did, what significant changes happened, and some of the successes in the measurement data that we collect. These are some photos of our summer parks program. I did attend 1 year, and we got the kids into the creek. They enjoyed it very much. Once we got them in the creek and got them digging for rocks and macroinvertebrates, it was hard to get them back out of the creek. And then you kind of drive by later in the summer, and you see them in the creek again without, your assistance, and they just enjoyed themselves very, very much. So we want to keep that education component for the kids, and I think the restoration will give us a lot more to talk about. So here is a rough project schedule. We're hoping to have the wetland delineations done this month. The topographic survey and stream assessment by next month, and then we kind of get into design and permitting, which of course takes the most time as well, especially the permitting part. So we're not looking at construction until next winter, next January, hopefully. Then we can kind of get the plantings done in April. Just letting everybody know, again, this is tentative and also subject to change. So we did want to point that out. And I'll pass it up to Joe.
Thank you, Latisse. You hear me all right?
No, throw it over to you.
My name's Joe Sweeney. I'm the Executive Director of the Water Science Institute, which was formed approximately 5 years ago to study dams, the consequences of dams, legacy sediment, and how dam removal can affect water quality and stream restoration opportunities. We particularly focus in on the impact of erosion and erosion's effects on water quality and nutrient loading to waterways. And part of the techniques that we use are to identify restoration and other kinds of water quality improvement opportunities, and then to measure and confirm results of those kinds of restorations. For this particular project, we are going to be using something called LiDAR differencing. And with LiDAR differencing, what we do is we take two sets of existing public data, in this case, 2008 and 2014 LiDAR sets. We subtract one from the other, and will show us it'll quantify the magnitude of vertical and horizontal change for a particular area. This is an example of what we've done in York County as an exercise mapping to demonstrate how this would apply to the Willis Run project. Here we've taken the lower south branch of the Cadorus Creek at the Huck 12 watershed level, and we've identified the size of this watershed, 40 square miles, and identified the number of dams involved, 17, which is a way to begin to identify erosion, restoration, or monitoring opportunities. We started historic dams and or other kinds of impoundments that we can identify in a watershed. We then can bring it down to any level. We can bring it down to the parcel level if need be, and identify erosion hotspots in a given watershed. We'll be doing that as additional confirmation for Mary and the Working Lands team in Willis Run. With that, we can quantify stream length, bank height, annual erosion, and annual erosion per length of stream, and the load for any given length of stream, and among many other things. This is a very short version of our presentation and the capabilities that we have. That's an important part of the identification of restoration opportunities is how thick is the sediment in a given area. With our LiDAR differencing, we can determine what that level of sediment is, and we've also used public and proprietary code to develop enhanced stream center lines. And those stream center lines are critical because the more accurate the stream center line, the more accurate will be the data outside of the stream center line. And for that reason, we put a great deal of emphasis on focusing on stream center lines and measuring them as best we can. We can also introduce canopy height to the model so that we can, again, use additional data metrics to add to the stream length, the parcel owner, the sediment thickness, and canopy to determine where a restoration may or may not be most viable. For this particular project, we're going to have 3 data sets because we'll have the 2 that we just identified from 2008 and 2016. And in mid-March, we will be out at the Willis Run site and be using what's called drone photogrammetry. So whereas our LiDAR that we acquire from public data sets is about 1 square meter per set of returns, for the photogrammetry, we go down to the centimeters. So when we're done with the mapping and measuring of that, it'll look like we took photographs of it. And then we will have a third data set that will be able to instantly difference from the 2016. So we'll have 3 sets of data to show what the erosion rate was in Willis Run over a basically 14-year period from 2008, 2016, then from 2016 to 2022. And with that, it ought to give us a really detailed baseline, and then allow us to continue to monitor the post-restoration project BMPs and determine, to what extent that they're working, where there might be adjustments, and what worked well, what didn't work well. But at least we'll have an annual confirmation of how those data sets will be able to inform our decision making. As I was talking to Latisse beforehand, we are big proponents of beginning to apply QR codes to these restoration to better inform the public, to provide a more transparent, accessible way for the public to identify what is going on in their watersheds. So in theory, you would place these QR codes at the parks, at strategic sites, and anyone with a smartphone would be able to find out instantly what is going on in the watershed. If we use this QR code here today, which contains my entire presentation, we can switch that out, and we could put the entire presentation that we're showing here today into that QR code, which could then be displayed and begin to inform the neighborhood as one way to inform the neighborhood about what is going to occur in that particular area. And it can be revised throughout the project as project milestones are met or public outreach is done. You can just enter, you keep the same QR code, enter different data in, and you have a dynamic way to begin to provide information to the community. And with that, my presentation is concluded.
Thanks, team. It's Robert again. So thanks, everybody. I think, as you could see, it's a very comprehensive project with a lot of different team players and partners bringing a lot of different expertise to one unique project and a very unique area. So doing a project like this with all these components is rare, and something that we're really proud of at Working Lands. And a goal of ours is to find these type of opportunities where you can bring this group together, collaborate, and really just not add just the water quality value, but the educational value, the data, the monitoring value. All these things come together, makes our tax dollars more effective, and really helps to help the community. So that's the main goal of this project. We're very excited about it. We thank all the partners, the city of York, very much for your support. And we look forward to any questions or suggestions you have from this presentation. And we're happy, as I said earlier, if you missed it, to tweak things as we work through. We want to work with you and the community to make sure that the end product is something that everybody's happy with. And you have our commitment and promise that we'll be there through the whole process to deliver that type of quality product. So with that, we're open to any questions or comments.
Good afternoon, everybody. Michael Helfrich, I'm the mayor of the city of York, former Lower Susquehanna River keeper, and the founder of the Cador's Creek Improvement Partnership. You're looking at probably the most previously addressed little section of stream in the city of York. We've tried many, many things to address things here. And so I want to give you a little background, and also I have some questions about the project. So first, I want to add that the section adjacent to Noonan Field, along Wood Street, I believe it is, on the southwest side, I think it is. So probably starting about 2002, we began planting in that area. Around 2005, we worked with the Fish and Boat Commission to install the in-stream structures that you'll find down there. And we've had multiple efforts in Lincoln Park to try and address the erosion there, including plantings, habitat plantings, all have, may I say that they've all failed? Is that a fair assessment?
They held on as long as
They held on as long as they could. So while I'm very excited about the project, you can understand that I have a little skepticism on some of it. Because what you're dealing with here, and I know you guys all do this for a living, what you're dealing with here is the downstream result of a lot of paving of upstream watershed. So before I get into all that, I just want to say I hope that there is great care taken in maintaining the existing native plants that were put there by nearly a generation ago. The folks that have been working there, and the kids that have been working on those projects. And of course, downstream at Kiwanis Lake is an Audubon important bird area that has been incorporated into all of this. My first question is, how is this going? And I understand, I actually believe that the only thing you can call stream bank restoration is the reattachment to the floodplain. I don't believe that any kind of putting anything in is actually restoration. I call it re-engineering. But the only true restoration is to remove the sediment, the legacy sediments, and to reattach those floodplains. So, of course, that takes up a lot of land to do that. So I'm curious as to or I will want to see kind of a report on how much land is being removed from usage, essentially, because we have to step back. We have to have a gradual plane up. If you don't have a gradual plane up, then you just have erosion again a couple years later. It doesn't take very long around here for the water to get the best of us. So I'd like to see kind of where we have to pull back any kind of existing structures, existing features, existing athletic fields, anything like that. The thing that is most perplexing to me is the results. The project will reduce flooding that occurs as the result of heavy rains. That flooding, again, is that is caused by the drainage of impervious surface up in the watershed. And Willis Run is just the bottom of the funnel, particularly the area that you're looking at. And you're not changing the width of the bridge, kind of the release point of the funnel below Lincoln Park or Jim Gross Park. I am not understanding in any way how this would reduce the flooding of Lincoln Park. So can you maybe help me with that?
Yeah, so flooding is as you know, complex issue. And obviously what's going on upstream is something we can't control with what we're doing at the site. But the way that flooding can be addressed at the site involves the combination of what we do with the size of the channel and the floodplain connection, as well as what we do with the soils in that floodplain connection area. So if we're able to increase recharge of water down into the groundwater table as opposed to out into the overbanks, we can do that through soils, we can do that through vegetation, we can do it through a combination of both. But that's typically how we see the floods be reduced in a setting like this.
And I might just add that we totally agree with you in your overall concept, right? We're not saying that this is by any means like a silver bullet, right? So this will it will help in the conditions, in severe conditions, it will add some value to reducing flooding. But you're right, if it's a 100-year storm, it's flooding, right? So, it's going to move the needle, but is it going to fix the whole problem? Absolutely not. But it will help with the localized flooding in certain situations, as Mary described. But it's really, that's sort of an ancillary benefit toward the overall goal was really just for the water quality and some of those other features. So agree with you 100%. And we're never, hopefully that didn't come off too strong in that fact sheet, but we're not stating that it would ever totally eliminate flooding in that area.
So I'm a skeptic on invasive species removal because I don't think most people have the stamina for it. There's a reason they're invasive because they're stronger, they sprout earlier, they have fewer predators. As the Lower Susquehanna Riverkeeper, I really actually fought against a lot of wasted money on invasive species removal. And I only advocate for it if you control the property yourself or if you're at the headwaters. Because if you're not at the headwaters, everything else is jumping in right behind you and it's going to propagate the next year. You have to have consistent removal. That takes a lot of energy. We've seen in the City of York projects come and go very rapidly because of the lack of that maintenance. Who is responsible for your removal of invasive species, your continuing monitoring and maintenance of removal of invasive species?
We are. Working Lands is responsible
For how many years?
5 at least.
Okay.
So this project will, and the reason why we use a lot of these best management practices is that the buffer stabilizes 5 to 7 years. And it's kind of complicated. It goes to the permitting. So, but the buffer will stabilize at 5 years to 7 years, most likely 5, and then it will become what it is. So you don't have to deal with invasive species in the future, hopefully. So it's we'll deal with that for the first 5 years. It stabilizes, the plants strengthen, and then you usually have very less invasive species.
So I will let you evaluate you. It's great because you have a test plot right in your project, but you'll be able to evaluate there along Wood Street because from 2002 to 2005, we removed the invasive species. We planted the same plants you're looking at over here. Although add in some red buds, that's my favorite. They're my favorite.
Red buds?
Red buds. Add the red buds in. You'll find some red buds over there along Willis Run. Those are the ones that we planted
Those are yours, huh?
20 years ago.
Okay.
They're just beautiful and, they're good fun trees.
I was there yesterday and I asked Robert about that. I was wondering who had installed that.
Oh, you gotta use your mic. They're calling for you after. Yeah.
Mayor, I was there yesterday and was impressed. I asked Robert who installed the buffer because it's actually for in the portion that was installed, as far as I could tell, it's mature and it's done its job. And I did see where I guess there were some sort of controls that were put in some years ago. Yeah, they were also obvious, but overall, I thought it did its job. It was the only place I saw a bird, a duck, a dove, and a downy woodpecker.
Very cool. Yeah, so that'll give you an opportunity to see whatever you're doing now, what it's going to look like. Because to be honest with you, the City of York is not going to continue to maintain the removal of invasive species. That's just beyond our capacity.
Right.
What else? Latisse, do you have any update on, so for more background, 90% of the year, maybe not that much, but a lot of the year, the flow of this stream comes from one source and one source only, and that is the pumping of the upstream quarry. When we first started our work, it was on a kind of a septic pump kind of thing. So there's a big pond in the bottom of the quarry. And when it filled up to a certain point, they would pump like 2,000 gallons a minute into the creek. And there it would go down to the lake. And for a while there, we would have some fish came and stuff, but then it would all dry up and there'd be a bunch of dead fish there. So there was some work to try and get them on a better schedule to maintain the waterway. But honestly, yeah, this waterway is a dry stream. without the cooperation of the quarry. So is there any update on how that's going to play into this project to make sure that any kind of aquatic habitat benefits are going to be able to be sustained?
Well, that's a great question, and we have talked about it internally, something that we're definitely aware of, and we plan on meeting with the quarry to clearly identify what we're doing and find a way, hopefully, where we can work in together to try to keep the flow. You know, obviously there could be some challenges to that, but we are aware that that is a concern. We have heard and know about them being more open to changing their flow to meet that local requirement. So we hope with this project that will continue and that we can kind of capitalize on that. But yeah, we definitely are aware of that potential.
And then I guess my follow-up question was, is there any funding for a partnership with the quarry to help them? Because they have their reasons for why they do what they do.
Yeah, right.
And they also only have a certain amount of availability because this is spring, you know, their water supply is spring fed from the bottom up. So when they've got water, they've got water. And I guess, I mean, that's something we have to live with, but I didn't know if as part of the project or if there was any effort to seek funding for a partnership with the quarry.
Well, we're definitely open to that. And if you have any suggestions, we that's one big thing that Working Lands does is we're able to go out and find the funding. That's a big piece of what we do. And we find multiple funding sources to fund one project. We're just talking about another project we have in York County, and it's going to be, 4 or 5, maybe even 6 different grant programs. So that's really one of our expertise, and we're totally open to that. I don't know if you had any suggestions, but we'll definitely look into that. I don't have one right off the top of my head, but once you start, looking, usually you can find some types of funding sources for various different programs. So we're definitely open to that, and we'll look into that for you.
And then my last question, the segment, and I'm going to say it's between Atlantic and Pacific. That's the real sore spot that we have, possibly not from the perspective of the TMDL or getting reductions, but the actual effect on our homeowners. That's the number one effect of Willis Run on the immediate homeowners is that erosion in that little section. So I would just ask you to pay extra attention because we have tried and tried, and we can't seem to stop nature there in that little area. So it would be great if you could put some focus on that and see if there's anything that can be part of this project that would help those homeowners out.
That was actually something that I wanted to focus on in particular because of where they're located and what I've seen in that section. So we will absolutely do what we can to address that.
Very cool. Thank you very much. And I really look forward to this.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate the questions.
Good afternoon. I'm Tom Landis. I'm the superintendent for Parks and Rec. And first and foremost, I'm extremely excited that you folks are taking a look at that section of stream that comes through our part of the city on the west end of town. Obviously, as you can see, as those culverts that we were discussing a little bit earlier, as the mayor stated, they at one time we're in a vertical position, maybe stacked too high, and at one time did a decent job of retaining the bank on that southwest side. But obviously, as erosion took hold, the water was able to get in behind those concrete culverts, and they eventually fell in. Prior to them, going back to when I was a kid who played at Lincoln Park, there used to be a cinder block wall with a concrete pad with a water fountain that you could spit water out into the creek, and even a rope swing that you could jump off the side of this platform and swing out across the creek and come back over. So I think those retaining buffers were at one time the answer to a failing recreational site that was once there. I certainly echo the mayor's concerns and interests of how you develop, retain, sustain the creek banks that are between Atlantic Avenue and Pacific Avenue. As a kid, when I worked for the park system, I was sent in there numerous times with weed trimmers to trim those banks. But I also understand the challenges that it will present to equipment and how you're going to get in there. So I'm very curious to see how you do that. But at the same time, the mayor is correct. Probably some of our most heard voices regarding Willis Run come from that. I guess you can call it a block, but it's really not even a block. It's what, maybe 100 feet or so of real estate that is positioned in between those two bridges. Willis Run is kind of reminds me, I refer to it as a straight shot. When the water comes in from the bridge there at Roosevelt Avenue, it's a straight shot until it gets into the area that the mayor and his crew of folks years ago worked on in Noonan Park. With that, I think of a straight shot. I think of traffic on a road. Cars go faster. So therefore, the water flow, obviously, I would think is cruising at a pretty good rate through there. I know you haven't really designed, if I'm correct. You're still going into that design phase. So I'm interested a little bit upon receiving your drawings. Curious to see how you move the creek through that area. Of course, I'm thinking about already. We have a play structure, a net climber, a tire swing, and a set of belt swings that are right in there. Years ago when that park was redone back in the early 90s, the banks were a little bit further in, and we tried to maintain a suitable recreation space between the swings and the creek. After just experiencing the stream improvement project over on Poorhouse Run in Memorial Park, a phenomenal project. I really got to see how the floodplains and incorporating them into the park schematics, into that ground or into that land area, how it really is effective. So with that being said, I'm wondering, and maybe it's too early to answer this question, but that area that we call the tough timber area, which is the net climber and the two swing sets, do you foresee that being an area that is going to be impacted with a floodplain, or maybe how the stream is directed or routed? And the reason why I ask is obviously, 2 years, or 3 years from now, but I think to 2023, you're actually planning on doing the actual site work. Should we be concentrating on trying to maintain that play area after we get through this playground season, where we're putting money into wood carpet and we're putting money into swings and we're putting money into possibly a piece of equipment or an area that may have to be reconfigured? Can you give me any insight on that?
Yeah, that area is one that I do have concern that we may need to shift just because of the proximity and what we are going to need to do. So I would say if it's possible to, not put as much into it now and just waiting till we get through the design phase, I think that would be helpful for you.
Correct. I mean, we have areas over there that we can certainly move that equipment around to situate it, back in there, because it is a very heavily used park.
Yeah.
I'm sure Latisse has filled you in on the number of rentals, and, in the summertime, that probably is one of our most rented facilities, along with about 3 or 4 other locations. Certainly ecstatic that you're doing the bulk of this work during the wintertime, because obviously our park patron loads are minimal at that time. But I think it's well needed. As a kid, Kiwanis Lake, there's a certain time in the spring where the carp would actually go as far as Grosse Park or Lincoln Park to come up and spawn. I remember very vividly certain times of the year, neighborhood kids and I going down there with nets and trying to catch the fish as they work their way up through the creek. Of course, over the years, and primarily when that ripple or that rock setting was put in there by the culverts, that pretty much stopped a lot of fish from moving up through there. But it was amazing how the fish of Kiwanis Lake would go up through that stream and spawn and do whatever fish do, in the shallower waters until they would return back to the lake. I think a 5-year maintenance plan is fantastic, Mayor, especially as it relates to getting through maybe the first couple years of whether or not whatever you've planted was able to sustain, and not through vandalism, but just, obviously the element conditions that affect plantings. But other than that, I look forward to seeing this project, go through. Letice is right on about the kids in our community, that whole area through Audubon, and the passion of some of the York City School District teachers and the curriculum that's presented to them. The kids have been a huge part of not only playing in Willis Run and around Quantus Lake, but doing actual studies and science projects. So I think this will enhance also what has been taking place with the replacement and refurbishing of our spillway. Obviously, I think that that's going to help alleviate some of the flooding, not all of it, but I mean, when we do have flooding events, hopefully that spillway is going to open up and allow for that water to continue its path down to the Codorus and not serve as a dam, so to speak, and back everything up. And then one last question. I know with the Roosevelt Bridge, I believe there are, I'm not sure what you refer to the underside, but there's like 3 openings where probably 2 of them are probably, I know one of them was 100% closed, if not 2. Would that be reopened underneath that bridge to get more water flow to span across that area? Referring to the mayor's, one of the things that I think of a funnel or a bottleneck is right there. Is there any thoughts about that real quickly?
Yeah, we would definitely be incorporating some modifications to the blockages there because that is causing like the weird hydraulic funnel condition that you guys are experiencing. So that would be incorporated in the project design as well.
Awesome. All right. Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Very much. Great. I think that is all the questions. Are any questions through the Zoom? Sorry, it's kind of hard for us to see if there are any like hands raised or anything like that. Are there any questions from the folks that are attending through Zoom? He said no. All right. Well, great. Well, thank you, everybody, again. Thank you to the city of York. Thank you to all the partners. We really appreciate it. We do think this is going to be a really exciting project. It's, as the mayor said, it's in a tough location, and we know that. That's why we chose it. It's easier to work in the headwaters, no doubt, but then you're not working in an urban area. You're not working in an environmental justice distressed area. So we understand the challenge, and we're really looking forward to it. And I think the benefits will speak for themselves when we get the opportunity to get to that point. So thank you again. We're always welcome for any questions or comments throughout the whole process. And I'm sure we'll be in contact very soon. So have a great day for the folks online, and we'll be around later for folks here if they want to chat. Thank you.